Hi guys, it is April from Getting Hooga With It. Today I want to talk about my birth story. I had a very positive labor and a more traumatic delivery, and I wanted to share with you my personal story and my experience giving birth to my daughter. Let's get into it. So I have done a whole other video introducing you guys to little Nora Poppy, who is adorable and sweet, and I'm so grateful for her every single day. I'm just amazed that she's here. So head on over and check that out if you want to meet her. But I really wanted to do this video. I had planned to do a birthing video from the get-go, but I really thought it would be important to put this story out there. I was very intent on having a natural, positive birth. Like, that was my number one priority. When I would tell people that I was pregnant, a lot of people, not everyone, but many people would like launch into their horror story about their pregnancy and their birth. Particularly their birth. And I always felt like, why are you telling me this horror story when I'm going to go through that? And I can't remember who it was that I was watching this video, and this woman said, you know, if someone told you that they were going to get married, you wouldn't launch into like, oh, I hope that works out, because like, do you remember Charlie down the street when he got married and then it only lasted 2 days and like went into like terrible news about marriage? Like, no one does that, except it seems for birth, and I don't know what that is about. Birth doesn't have to be like yelling at your husband, why did you do this to me, or never again, or all of that stuff. Like, I did not want that. I think it's like does a disservice to everyone when that's the story that every woman's birth is like, or I just don't like it. Especially since we tried for a really long time. Like, it was 3 years before we were able to have IVF and get pregnant with Nora. And so the last thing I wanted to do was have these like negative stories in my mind, other people's stories being put on me. I just really wanted a different story for myself. I really wanted a positive and happy birth, and I partly got that. I partly really did get that, and I partly didn't. During the delivery itself, I remember thinking, I can never tell anyone the story of my birth, like online. I can't tell anyone because it's no longer positive. And I thought about that literally while I was delivering, and I thought about that a lot since, and I realized that that's also just a disservice to people to suggest that birth is always one or the other. And I, for myself, believe that sometimes it is just in the middle, and that's okay. Like, sometimes things can be both positive and negative. So let's start out with the positive. So I would say that I had a really positive labor. Leading up to the birth itself, I took a course called hypnobirthing. It's actually a kind of a mindset that you go into. It's not woo-woo or anything. It's about like breathing through contractions and trying to have some ownership over birth. And so I took this course from the Positive Birth Company. It's run by this woman in the UK. It was just an online course. I loved that course. I would still so recommend that course. It was really wonderful. I felt, after going through that whole course, I felt so empowered, and I felt like, you know, this is going to be something that I experience, but not something that happens to me. And up until that point, I felt like a lot of the stories I heard were about things happening to people. And I just wanted my own story and Nora's own story. I really wanted to have a natural birth at a hospital with my general practitioner, who is wonderful. She's just a lovely, lovely woman. She practices, she's like my doctor, and she'll be Nora's doctor, and she's Barry's doctor, but she also delivers babies, which is fantastic. And it's like a 90% chance that you will have her at the delivery and everything, with the clinic that she's under, so which is wonderful. So I really wanted it to be her. I wanted to use gas and air between, like, in active labor right before pushing, like 7 to 10 centimeters, which is like the really hard part. I wanted to just do gas and air at that point. I wanted a really calm ambiance with candles and nice music. And I wanted skin to skin afterwards and delayed cord clamping. And again, I had some of that, but not all of it. So on August 25th, my labor began. My doctor, who I was supposed to have, was actually away at a wedding in Montreal, I think. So I knew that she wasn't going to be there, which was upsetting just because I love her so much. If you met her, you totally get it. She's like soft-spoken, really gentle, very kind. She's not someone who's gonna like tell you what to do. Your health is very much a discussion. I just love her. She's younger than me. I adore her. So of course I wanted someone like that at my delivery, but she was away at a wedding and she has a life, so you know. But it began on August 25th. I've got a little clip for you because I did a little bit of vlogging, tiny bit. Hello everyone. The lighting in here is impeccable. I am in labor at the moment. So just a little, I'm also bouncing around on a birthing ball, so maybe I'll stop doing that. So it's August 25th, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, my water broke. I was feeling some contractions just before then, not regular. But yeah, my water broke at 2 o'clock in the morning multiple times. Like it doesn't break always in one go, I realized. It broke when I was running to the washroom and trying not to step on Libby, and then in the shower. There was no point in taking a shower in the end. But because I have group B, essentially that can cause some harm to the baby. So it was really important that we get to the hospital and get an IV in for an antibiotic. So here I am, and it is 9 o'clock, 9:20 in the morning, and I am induced. Unfortunately, I really wanted to have a completely natural birth, but I'm being induced. We've got Pitocin going right now, which is not ideal, but here we are. And I'm just kind of open to whatever happens at this point. Just want the baby here safe and sound. But yeah, so that is the latest and greatest. Strangely enough, after my water broke, it slowed down, like my contractions slowed down. So now I'm on Pitocin, so we'll see if they get more intense. But essentially, August 25th is most likely going to be her birthday, which is very exciting. Can't wait to meet her. So I'll keep you posted if I can. We'll see how much of this I actually vlog. Probably not a lot. Probably end up telling you guys a lot of what happened instead. So even though I couldn't do this completely naturally, and even though I knew I had to have drugs, I had to have Pitocin in order to have this baby, because that's just what happens, for to, you know, make sure that she's not in any risk of infection or anything like that. Yes, I had to be induced, but I still felt really positive about it. We got into the birth room and we set it up with like fake candles and spa music, and it was very dim lighting, quiet and calm. The nurse that I had 2 previous natural births, so I knew she was going to be like fighting for me to also have that experience. She didn't have Pitocin in her births, but still, like, she had done that. So it was a really good environment for me at that time. And I was doing all of the hypnobirthing stuff. I was up breathing. Which is basically breathing in for a count of 4 and out for a count of 8 over and over and over again. And Barry was unbelievable. He was like a rock for me during all of that. He was coaching me through it. And I remember at one point in my labor, I was working through a contraction. He was helping me through it. And I just started to cry because I remember at my niece's birth, which I was lucky enough to be there for, my sister and her husband he was coaching her through a contraction. And I remember thinking at the time, I was single at the time, and I thought, I'm not doing this with anyone but the love of my life. And then here was the love of my life coaching me through my own contractions. And it was like very full circle for me. And like, I just loved him so much more than I ever had before. And so there was so much positive for me. So I decided to get an epidural. I recognized the pains that I was having were at this heightened level. I knew this wasn't a natural birth anymore. As soon as the Pitocin was involved, it was no longer really natural. So I could try and go out without the epidural, but it was not the birth that I had planned. And so in that situation and the amount of pain that I was in, I just decided, you know what, I think it's best for me to have an epidural, because Pitocin really changes the intensity of it. I remembered when I was deciding whether or not to get an epidural, I remembered Elle Lindequist. She's like a mommy vlogger here on YouTube who I love. She just had her 3rd child. Her first 2 children were completely natural births. I think they were both water births. And then she just had Brighton, and she had to be induced, I think, with Pitocin for that birth. And she decided to get an epidural for that. So I remembered thinking of her in that moment and thinking, okay, well, that makes sense then. If she was struggling through an induced labor and had 2 natural births, like, obviously this is different. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to get the epidural. Hello, it's me from a few hours later. So I started Pitocin at 9 o'clock-ish, and that was really intense. Oh my goodness. As you can tell, I'm lying down on a hospital bed. That was really intense. Yeah, and they said that Pitocin kind of ups the game, like what you might experience in just a few hours is something that, like, a natural labor would experience in a matter of days sometimes. So, but Barry was there for me so much, and I breathed through a lot of it and hated life for a lot of it. I was lucky enough to get to 5 centimeters dilated with nothing. But I did decide to go ahead and get an epidural, and I am telling you, it was the best decision of my life. Feeling really, really good now and relaxed, and I've taken a little snooze. So I had the Pitocin at 9 something, and then I had the epidural at, what was it, 2? 2. So now it's 4, and I'm just relaxing and snoozing. And we're gonna meet baby girl really soon. And I loved laboring with the epidural. I was the happiest I'd ever been. I slept a ton. I listened to Jane Eyre on audio, which was really nice. I continued to listen to the spa music sometimes. And my labor progressed really quickly. I went from 5 centimeters, which is when I decided to get the epidural. I was at 5 centimeters dilated. I went from 5 centimeters to 8 in the span of 2 hours, which is pretty darn good. And so I got to 10 centimeters dilated, and they wanted to keep me there for a while because they wanted the baby to come down into the birthing canal even more so that when I do start pushing, it's easier. So we did that, just kind of hung out for 2 hours, and then it was time to push. And I felt really empowered pushing. Now, I was also very tired, so I would push with all of my might and then feel like I was gonna fall asleep, and then push with all of my might and then feel like I was gonna fall asleep. It felt really great pushing because my nurse kept telling me, like, you really know exactly where you're pushing and you're pushing super well, and I genuinely felt amazing. And I would say it was here that things did take that turn for the worse, and I ended up having a traumatic delivery because of that. When I was pushing, Nora's head at one point went sideways, and she was kind of coming at it from a different angle, and they're like, that is not what we want. We want her like normal, coming out, and she wasn't. So I went on my side to labor on my side and push on my side. And the idea was that she would flip back around to have her head right to come out. What ended up happening instead was she did turn around, but she did a 360 kind of thing. And what ended up happening was she ended up being pinned, like her little hands were like this up here, and the umbilical cord was wrapped around her arm. So she had no choice. This is how she was coming out. And I had no choice either. And that's how I was trying to push. So that is when things really started to stall. A doctor came in, and I was pushing at this point for an hour and a half. She's like, okay, you're not progressing at this point, and if you don't, we have to talk about other options to help you along. And I was so enraged that anyone would even suggest that to me. My sister pushed for like 5 hours, and this is not something that I talked to her about this the other day, and she was like, I don't recommend anyone pushes for 5 hours. But I really wanted a certain kind of birth, and I felt like it was slipping away from me. So they said, yeah, we're going to have to either do a C-section, or we're going to have to use the vacuum, or I was going to call them tongs. The forceps, they're not tongs. So when she came in and told me that, I was like, right, that's fine. Go on out and let me work this out. So I was like, Barry, put on Beyonce. And so we listened to Beyonce, and I was like, turn it up. So we were listening to Beyonce, and I pushed for that half an hour like I had never pushed before. Now, we didn't know that she was up like this. We just thought it was not progressing. I got Barry to go and get me ice chips and a cold cloth from my face so that I'd wake up a little bit. That didn't really help, but I really tried to push super, super hard. Half an hour later, there was no progress, unfortunately. And they decided to use forceps, not tongs, forceps. Basically, the plan was they were going to bring her down a little bit with the forceps, and then I would push her out. And I agreed to that because I was like, well, I'm still doing it, so I'm still empowered by doing that. So I agreed. But of course, no one knew until we were in the process of that little Nora's hands were up here and she was pinned, and there's a lot more coming out than just a head. So at this point, things changed. Once they realized what was actually going on, they had to do an episiotomy, and she was delivered in this super bright room with like 2 doctors, 2 nurses, some guy in the back who was going to be checking on oxygen who never acknowledged my existence. They really wanted delayed cord clamping. That didn't happen. Barry cut the cord, and I remember while that was happening, I was just like, no, like I couldn't say it because I lost a lot of blood at that point, but I just was like, this is the exact opposite of what I wanted for my daughter and for myself. One thing that was nice was after I guess they checked her, I was kind of out of it. They did bring her over to me right away, and I had skin to skin for about 30 minutes. which was really good. And I remember in that moment seeing her, and she had dark hair, and I had always imagined she'd have dark hair, and that was wonderful. Um, Unfortunately, I had lost a lot of blood, so I felt like I was going to pass out a lot, and I was kind of nervous that I was going to drop her, and I was not feeling myself. I felt like I was going to throw up, felt like I was going to pass out. So Barry ended up taking Nora at that point, which was really good. I was really glad that he took her because she was safe, and I could just kind of rest at that point. But I felt really angry, if I'm being honest. I was really angry that it hadn't gone exactly to plan. I also had this blood clot that wouldn't get out, and my nurse had to like really press hard on my stomach over and over again, and I was like swearing at her. I was not a nice person. I was not a nice person, but who is when you're in like extreme amount of pain? So it's hard because, you know, I felt during the delivery part that I was kind of robbed of that positive birth story that I had dreamed about for me and my baby. But at the same time, they saved her, and they probably saved me too. Like, they were checking on me, and they were making sure that she was going to be okay. And so it wasn't all positive, but it also wasn't all negative either. In the end, my labor, which did not go to plan, was still incredibly positive in my eyes. Like, I'm really proud of myself for that labor. And in the end, the delivery was traumatic, and I'm still kind of sorting through stuff from it. And it's both. It just is both for me. Nora is honestly so perfect. I'm doing better every day. I'm getting a little stronger. I still feel lightheaded while I'm not while I'm filming this, but like the day that I'm filming this, I'm still feeling lightheaded. It's like 4 days after her birth. And so there is that, but little by little, I am genuinely getting better. And I just wanted to share a birth story that has both positive and negative, because people can be so extreme one way or another, and I would love for them to be more extreme on the positive side because I love those stories so much. But I did want to put out there another story that is both. So let me know in the comments below, if you have given birth, what was your birth story like? Did you have a completely positive story? Did you have a truly traumatic experience? Was it somewhere in between like me? I would love to know what you went through yourself. And I hope that you guys are doing well, and I'll talk with you soon. Bye.